My name is Antony Reed. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Game Developers Association of Australia. I know a lot of people in the room. For those of you that I don't know, I really want to get to know you. That is the purpose of an event like you guys. So I start this talk today with an apology, actually. Actually, two apologies. So I'm off to a really good start. The first is that I was supposed to share the stage with Antony Lawrence, who's the studio GM of 2K Australia. Tony and a few of the leads from his team have been called to 2K Boston. Make of that news what you will. I'm predicting some good news stories in the very near future. The second apology is for throwing my speech away about 15 minutes ago. And the reason I did that is not necessarily because I'm slightly dim. It's because walking through the lobby this morning, I realized something that I think I've misplaced in my head. They're automated, it's just a button. I should probably also apologize for how complex and big this joint is, right? I mean, this is a big venue. You don't really think about it when you're economy thing. So the thing that I was thinking about is there's something quite special about a GCAP. And there are very few occasions during the course of a year where the industry gets together. We do tend to see each other a lot overseas as opposed to in our own hometowns. And when we do, there's this amazing atmosphere of friendship. And I realized that this morning as I was walking out. I had a rough night last night. And those smiles, and you know, that's what you get. It's the smiles and the hugs and the handshakes. And yeah, occasional groping, which is fair enough. But to those people in the audience, to the students in the audience, I hope that is one of your big takeaways of GCAP. Because once you join our industry, that's what you get. You get, for want of a better cliche, an extended family. And when things are good, when things are bad, they are there. They are always there. I'll give you a quick example, actually. To the Victorians in the room, how happy are we that Neil Renison is back home? The rest, my So last year, we changed the structure of GCAP. Correction, I changed the structure of GCAP, and the board had the goodness to trust me with it. I wanted an event that could create conversation. I wanted talks that would inspire discussion. And it worked. It really worked. There were many conversations. Actually, it turns out you give people an inch and they'll talk an awful lot. And what happened was, I walked away from GCAP 2010 with this big pile of opinions, suggestions, ideas, thoughts. And what it helped me do was really formulate my activities within the GDA for the year ahead. Actually, what it gave me was too much information. And I sat there at the end of last year with this, which has now become a physical manifestation of ideas, really struggling to develop a thought pattern around what it is we wanted to do because there were so many good ideas. And I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I got the call. And it was an inspirational call. And this is not a dig, and I'm going to tell you this in advance, and some people already in the room already know about this. But I got a call from a representative of the film industry. And it was in December, and it was very, very shortly after GCAP. And the subtext of the call, it was actually hardly disguised, was join us or you'll lose. And during that call, and very shortly thereafter, some particularly nasty words went through my head. And it took me a while. I struggled to understand why somebody would make a call like that. Then I realized there's so few people that understand what it is we do. They still struggle with who we are, what we do, how a game is made from day to day. And within that context, I took that big ball of ideas, and suddenly a roadmap presented itself. And that became, the GCAP formulated every activity for 2011. It became the roadmap, and we achieved a lot this year. I said at GCAP last year that this would be the turning point for the industry. I said 2011 we would change, and we are absolutely changing. We started earlier this year with the R&D. You're going to get some announcements later on and discussions later on today that are hugely important for the industry going forward and will absolutely change the Australian ecosystem. And directly after that, I thought, you know what? film industry. I love you guys, but you've got it the wrong way now. You can't beat us. So if you want to join us, jump in the back of the wagon, we're going to take a ride. So we work on the roadmap for the industry. We really looked to government to help them understand what we were doing and how we were going to do it. We didn't put our hat in our hand. We didn't walk out and say, please give us money. We didn't do any of that. We just said, have a look at this creativity. And we put it on a giant plate for them. And they loved it. We have one of the highest awareness of all the creative sectors within government, state and federal right now. And it's all because of what you guys are doing on a daily basis. I tell you this because those thoughts, those ideas, are what I need from the GCAP. I need to now plot how we're going to take the successes of this year into next year. I need to work out how we're going to grow Australia, and I made this comment very publicly on GameSpot earlier this year. It's one of the top 3 development territories in the world over the next few years, and I genuinely believe we can do that. I get to see your talents every day. I get to talk to people in this industry about their concepts every day. It's what gets me up in the morning. It's why I go to work. It's why I absolutely adore my job. So in formulating that roadmap, it also formulated GCAP 2011. It was built around where the industry is right now and where I think we're going. It is built around the foundations we need to put in place to make that dream come true, to make Australia one of the top territories. And it wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. The fact is, they are the lifeblood of GCAP. They make this happen. They allow you to sit in this room and absorb what the speakers have to say. So I'm going to acknowledge him as well. But very quickly, you should also know it's not actually that hard or not that easy to sponsor GCAP. Every sponsor on our list has to invest in the industry. They have to commit to us that they will engage with you and want to work with you going forward. We could take other people's money and run, and believe me, I gave that a lot of thought during the course of this. But it wasn't about that. This GCAP had to be about where the support networks are going to be, and now I'm our sponsor. So, very quickly to go through them. Can't say Microsoft there. State Government of Victoria, for all of us that live in Victoria, you'll know the support there. L's right there. Epic, year on year, there's very few companies that believe in the Australian industry as much as Epic Games do. They keep coming back. They keep wanting to do more for us. PwC and Halfbrick. In PwC, an amazing partner to work with daily, especially as we formulate things with governments. They have been incredibly supportive of the industry. Halfbrick, for all their success, all they want to do is give back, and they do on a regular basis. So our silvers, Autodesk, don't need any introductions. Paul's here. There's something that we'll be discussing a little bit later on about Autodesk and some posters you'll probably have. Trescox, our new strategic legal partners. OpenFaint, again, back, looking at our iOS market, loving the creativity that they're seeing. The AIE, rock hands over. Training our students, and I'm hearing some really interesting stories about the future of AIE as well. Storm Effects, Martin, he's in the room, our supplier. If you're going to buy anything in the industry, you go to Martin. And LDB, our accountants, because we need them. Because I spend a lot of money and somebody has to account for it. Halfbrick again for the poker night. Put your hands up if you're doing poker night tonight. Okay, it's going to be a big night. We'll talk about it more later on in the day, but it's going to be a big night. If you were there last year, it wasn't a huge night. A lot of fun. Conference bag, where you kind of just look at the thing, it's a big game, right? It's right there. And FMOD for our lanyards. If you guys have not heard of FMOD, you need to. It's one of the best audio tools in the world, using some of the biggest games in the world, and it's developed on Flinders Street just down the road. And finally, our supporting partners, the City of Melbourne, looked at GCAP and thought, there's something here. This is something that can grow. This is something we can do something in the future. And they really want to support Simulation Australia. Yesterday we held the first Serious Games Forum, where we looked realistically at where serious games are going to go within defence, and we found out that we love more technology than defence does right now, which is quite an amazing call from one of the head of defence. And the IGEA, the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, who represent games publishers, Ron Curry's right there, have been incredibly supportive of our efforts this year. So I thank them greatly. I thank all of our sponsors for everything. To our speakers, for so generously giving of your time and knowledge on behalf of me, members of the GDA, and this audience, my sincerest thanks. Some of you have traveled an awful long way to be here, including one man with a cup of coffee in his hand right there. And we genuinely appreciate the time that you're giving us. And to you guys, one of the great things about a conference, and one of the most important things you need to learn very early about a conference is just there as an entity. How you get the most out of the conference is to make it yours. It is really important that you learn this lesson now. Turn this conference into your own. There are a lot of talented people there. In talking, sitting right next to you. Engage, network, start those conversations, ask the questions in those sessions. I saw playing all looking around, see intelligent people around it. I didn't miss that, there's nothing. Make GCAP your own, please. It's why we create this thing. We want that engagement. We want you to talk. I want you to talk to me. If you have those ideas, I need to hear them. Yeah, don't be shy. And that's all that's left for me. Other than to say, have a great GCAP. Enjoy yourselves. Get into it. Please ask the questions. That's why we're here. So I'm going to move straight into our keynote speaker. It gives me great pleasure because Tony and I have been trying to get Mike to Australia for a very, very long time. He's the founder of the Blog a Day. And if you don't read that site, you're missing out on something special. Because most of the influential and industry leaders read Blog a Day every damn day, including me. And I'll happily admit that I often don't know what he's talking about when he gets into the code. But the rest of it is quite extraordinary. It makes for extraordinary reading and helps you really cement what it is we do on a daily basis. He believes in games as a powerful tool for communicating stories. And even more importantly, he strives constantly for the betterment of our craft. So please make him very, very welcome from Insomniac Studios, Mr. Mike Acton.
All right, can you hear me? We're good? My name is Mike Acton. As Jody said, I'm from Insomniac Games. I'm the director there. And I'm really super excited to be here. I think that it's really cool to get an industry together, especially a local, well, local being a large landmass in this case, a local area, together to sort of, to really just talk about where we want to go and what we want to do and what's important to us as game developers, and just sort of share your perspective. And I think to sort of echo one of the things that Tony was saying, the purpose of any talk, the purpose of why I'm standing here, or any of our other speakers, is not so much to impart information, right? I'm certainly not going to give anybody any answers, and I don't think anybody expects that. I think that the purpose of any talk in any conference, really, and especially one like this, is just to give you something to talk about. Just, you know, when you leave the doors, when you go outside, when you have coffee or tea or whatever, you know, that you have some shared context, that you have a conversation. And so that's really what I'm hoping to do today, is to give you something to talk about when you go outside. I want to bring up a Reddit post, which some of you may have seen, came a couple of weeks ago, from an Australian game dev student. I'm about to finish high school in a few weeks. Is game development a wise career choice? So, what do you guys think? Raise your hand if you think it's a wise career choice. That's super interesting. My answer, personal answer to this, is it doesn't matter. Honestly, if you have to ask this question, if you have to ask whether or not it's a wise career choice, it's not a wise career choice. If I could do anything at all, if I could yell at you and scream at you and fight you, if I could do anything at all to stop you from doing it, it's not a wise career choice. But if I can't stop you, if nothing I can do can stop you from doing this, then it's just what you need to do. So the real question is, does it matter? It's not an important question. It's really irrelevant. I simply shouldn't be able to stop you. And I think for the most part in this room, especially considering how much has gone on with the Australian game development community over the last couple of years, nothing has stopped you guys from being game developers. I think that's what's telling. That you're here, that you're still going, and no matter what happens, no matter what is happening, nothing is stopping you from being game developers. So whether or not it's wise is not an important question. Tony Albrecht posted about this conference a few weeks ago on Google+. And I thought a lot of interesting questions came out of this particular thread. The first one, which we saw, I don't know how many times in every single thread that I've looked at as sort of I've examined the industry here, there's so many people, so many sort of just people who want to complain or bitch or whatever are saying, you know, the Australian game development scene is just dead, right? There's nothing left here and whatever. First of all, those people just need to shut the fuck up. But, you know, on the other hand, it's just simply not true, right? I mean, you're all here, right? There are game developers here, and so long as there are game developers, there is a game development scene. And I think most importantly, what is dead is the way we used to do things, right? The way Australia used to do things, the way more, you know, globally the way we used to do things, that's dead. But that's a completely different thing than saying game development is dead. Another point that was brought up is, you know, globally, if we look beyond Australia, is AAA as a thing an endangered species, right? And I'd say, sure, you know, to a certain degree, the way that it's always been done is certainly endangered. I don't think anybody would dispute that, right? If you look at sort of consoles, because when we think of AAA, we tend to think of consoles. You know, we tend to think of PS3 development, big budget PS3 development, big budget Xbox development, whatever. The consoles as a sort of sandbox that don't connect to anything and just sit in front of your TV, this sort of just really self-contained experience, I think that's dead, right? I mean, we see that as sort of a legacy experience now. We're looking forward to applying the lessons that we've learned from mobile and social and, you know, online and all this to these sort of big budget in front of your TV games. So the way we've always done consoles and AAA development is certainly dead. And I think more to the point is when people bring this up, they bring it up in the context of this sort of AAA development, which I imagine is the place that I want to be, is dead, right? And I think that's the real problem. You know, we aren't, as a group, what we aren't is console developers. What we aren't is AAA console developers, right? What we are is game developers. So we don't need to have our sort of identity wrapped up in this whole mental model of what AAA development is. And, you know, whether or not that happens to be what you're working on, whether or not you happen to be working on a big budget game or happen to be working with a large team, is largely an irrelevancy for you, right? For what you are as a game developer. You know, you are a game developer, I'm a game developer, I cannot take my identity from working at a big budget, big studio game. The other point that was brought up is there's, you know, sort of a lack of international development investment coming into Australia right now. And one, you know, I can't, honestly, I'm obviously not Australian. I don't know all the ins and outs of, you know, Australian politics and investments and whatever. But certainly I'm just pointing out this is something I've heard in those threads. But I want to point out sort of a really important fact, right? What we do is effectively entertainment, right? You know, if you put aside sort of the serious sector for a minute. And what we have is a group of extremely talented, extremely passionate people. And at the end of the day, you know, when you're looking at sort of a global investment portfolio, when you're looking at all these companies across the world, money goes where the talent is, period. So if you can demonstrate clearly that you are the talent, that you have the ability to do something that other people cannot do, the money will come. That's just it. No one's going to ignore that fact. You know, you're not going to have Activision or EA or whatever in LA saying, well, this is the best goddamn group of people I've ever met, but you know, they're in Australia, so no, it's not worth investing. That's just not going to happen, ever. You know, you look at Australian, you know, you can look at Australian pop entertainment or whatever in other sectors, right? In film or in, you know, in music, it's the same kind of thing. Money comes to comes to where the talent is, regardless of the value of whatever's happening in politics. Another question that got brought up is, what's happening with local education here? As people tend to do, just bitch about it and say it's really horrible. Honestly, that's true everywhere. It's not sort of particular to Australia that the education system sort of fails us in some regards, right? It doesn't train us to do, as a rule, what it is that we do every day. Part of it, there's this sort of additional side question of whether or not, one, that's possible, and two, that it matters. Because, I think for the most part, most of us got here without that kind of sort of directed education. So, it hasn't really significantly affected us in one way or another. But to putting that aside, I think there are a lot of other options, right? For sort of learning from each other. I think that's the key point, is that there's this sort of opportunity now with the people that are here, with the local groups, with the Australians that have in the room right now, right? To get together and to learn from that experience. There's quite a lot of experience in this country. There's quite a lot of long years of experience dealing with all the different problems of game development, a lot of understanding, a lot of talent. So take advantage of that, through collaborations, through mentoring, whatever. There's lots of opportunities to do that. Another relevant point that got brought up quite a lot is the sort of high Australian dollar. And I say it's largely relevant because it's based on the premise that this matters. That investment was here, that companies were here because the value of the dollar was lower before, right? And the value of the dollar is only relevant if you are in fact a commodity, right? If I'm going to outsource somewhere to sort of a set of B players somewhere, whether it's China or India or let's say Australia, if I'm going to outsource a set of B players, the value of the dollar matters. I'm going to want to go cheap because what I'm not looking for is high-end talent. So but that's not what you guys are, right? You're not cheap commodity talent. You are, in fact, A players, right? You stuck it out, you're here, you're pushing, you're learning, you're trying new things, you're experimenting. So in fact, it doesn't matter. Unless you are commodities, this point has no value. The population, irrelevant. Again, it only takes a couple of people. It only takes the people in this room to to make a difference and to really do something great. Another thing that I'll point out is, I realize that there's quite a lot of people, or a few people spread out across a large area, but there's still opportunities to get together locally. Tony has this meeting in Adelaide, for example, and he's gathered a bunch of game developers in that local area, and as I understand it, the first time that he got together, he just put the word out, and he got 70 game developers together in one place. So wherever you happen to be, I bet that there's at least a handful of people who are local to you, or close enough to you that they're willing to drive for a beer or two, right? To get together and talk and share experiences. So don't be alone, right? Don't hide. Get together with people around you and share as much as possible. No local publishers. So what? Big deal. Again, the publisher's going to go where the money is. It just, the talent. The money's going to go where the talent is. It really doesn't matter. No local consoles. Again, totally irrelevant. These are just sort of red herring arguments that we're seeing in these threads. So I think at the end of the day, right, when we get right down to it, there's cause for hope here in Australian development. From my perspective, from sort of an outsider perspective, looking in, seeing all the complaints, seeing all the bitching threads and all this, there's still cause for hope. What I see is we have a group of passionate developers. We have a group of talented developers. We have a lot of passion, a lot of talent here in the room and here in the country. And that's honestly all that's necessary. I certainly don't think that Australian game development is dead. I just think that the way that it has been done is dead. Now it's time just to look forward and sort of make something new. And aiming high. So let's putting aside all those details for now. I want to talk about a bigger picture issue. And that is that I think that games have won. They've won the battle for sort of the hearts and minds of our culture, of our combined sort of global culture. Games are not, this sort of second-class thing for kids. right? I really think that, I didn't see the serious games thing yesterday, but been talking to you guys and hearing a little bit about it. It's quite amazing to hear what people are, what a few people are doing with sort of the lessons that games have learned outside of the game space. And I think that if you look globally, you look at pretty much every single company out there. There is not a company that doesn't want to use the lessons that games have learned to apply to their own spaces. Games are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Everybody plays. They're a part of everything that we do. This battle is over. So, I think what we need to do is stop imagining ourselves as sort of second-class citizens as developers. Stop imagining that game development is somehow secondary to other types of development. And the movie thing is a perfect example, because this is super common. That even among game developers, right, people will imagine that somehow game development is a sort of this little brother to film development, which is the biggest load of shit ever. Honestly, game development dwarfs film development, on a scale that film, that, first of all, film is just one QTE, right? That's it. It's a degenerate game. So I agree. We shouldn't just put them in the QTE section of games and be done with it. So what are we seeing? What's going on right now? Proliferation of indies, right? We're seeing this not just here, but around the world. Just explosion of indies. We're seeing it in mobile space, in social space, and sort of all these spaces where the barrier to entry is a little bit lower, where you can get together a relatively small group of like-minded people and make a difference. Serious games, of course, now taken seriously. Social mobile spaces. Gamification, really not like the word, is irrelevant. The fact is that it's here, and it is, in fact, something that's being used. And I want to point out, while we're on this subject, that there's sort of a lot of vitriol that goes toward, that people apply toward gamification. But the fact of the matter is, as I said, you have essentially every company in the world that wants to use the lessons of games, and the fact that they are applying maybe these lessons improperly, is only a sort of a cry for help for somebody to help them use it better, to accomplish what they want to accomplish, which is ultimately depends on what it is, right? And right now, what's happening because of this sort of hard division between sort of game developers and gamification people, what we're seeing is that the wrong people are helping, right? People who are unqualified to help are helping, only because game developers aren't willing to help. So I think, to a degree, if you need to consider yourselves game developers, and that sometimes includes making games for things that are not for the sole purpose of entertainment, right? So we need to embrace it. We need to accept the word, embrace the idea, and just embrace and extend it, right? A lot of people wanted to use games to one degree or another to change the world, right? To whether or not to help sort of educational systems, or to help poverty, or find cures for various diseases, whatever. We're seeing a lot of active work in this, like using games to either build that sort of group, that passion of people about a particular subject, or in fact to get people to solve a problem like protein folding or something like that. I think all of these different things speak to the fact that games have won, right? They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous, and that we need to put aside our own mental model of what game development is, what game developers are, and shoot a little harder. And I think what it comes down to is that to a large degree we get in our own way. Our mental model of what it means to be a game developer is what's stopping us from any time. We're holding ourselves back. If not somebody else that's holding us back, it's the fact that we let them do whatever it is. If a publisher says, you can't do this, or if your boss says you can't do this, and you feel that it's something that you must do in order to sort of step forward as a game developer, it's not them that's holding you back, it's you, honestly, right? It's like I said at the beginning, right? If I could stop you from being a game developer, then maybe it's not a wise choice. And that's, I think, true about anything that you're passionate about. So if there's some change that you're passionate about, don't let anyone stop you from doing it. No one should be able to stop you. So for today, there's just 2 points that I want you to be able to take away. Just things to think about, again, as you leave and talk about. One is that you ought to aim higher. We ought to aim higher. And there's, I think to a large degree, this imagined invisible class system. Sometimes it's film and then games. Sometimes it's sort of big industry like Coca-Cola and then Microsoft and some other companies and then games way down here. Right? People imagine this sort of class system of whether or not businesses or individuals or developers or whatever. But it's all wrong, right? Whatever your model is largely based on the time you grew up, or sort of hearsay, or ideas handed down to you, and none of it, in fact, reflects the reality of today. The reality of today is that we provide more value, certainly more entertainment value, but also practical value in terms of sort of learning and educating and sharing message than virtually any other industry anywhere. So there's no reason why, when we think in terms of sort of this hierarchical structure of industry, right, that we can't imagine a game development studio playing alongside the same level field as somebody like Coca-Cola. There's absolutely no reason why that ought not to be true. The second thing that I'd like you to think about is that change is your own responsibility. That you cannot wait for somebody else to make change, whether that's a small local level or whatever. That you have to get up, you have to decide to do it yourself. You have to decide to make a difference. You have to decide to push something. There's, certainly as we look through a lot of these threads, we see a lot of blaming. A lot of people trying to blame somebody else for whatever it is that happened to them, right? But ultimately, it's your career, it's your passion, it's your talent, right? You need to take responsibility for it and decide what it is that you want to do. So, where do we start? Well, we start, as with most things, we start by asking the right questions. So why, we want to ask, why am I here? Well, not just here today, but in general, why am I here? What am I trying to accomplish? Why did I choose this path? What am I passionate about? There's this general of sort of games. What is it about games? What specifically about games am I passionate about? What's important to me as a game developer? I think in order to know what it is that you're going to sort of fight for and push for, you have to be able to answer this question. What drives me? What's important to me? What inspires me? What is it that would have to happen to make me get up every day excited about what's going to happen that day? What is it that inspires me most? For me personally, I find events like this where I can get together with more game developers, especially game developers that I've never met, and talk to them about things that we share, that across cultural lines, across even generational lines. Talking to people that are 20 years younger or 20 years older than me, that we share sort of this common passion, right? That's inspiring to me. How can I make an impact, right? What is it that you can do whether or not you're just starting out, you're a student, or you've been doing this for 20 years, and you're a little bit bitter? What can you do to make an impact? There's always room to make an impact. And then I think the more important question is, what can you do to make an even bigger impact? Your first inclination is usually based on that box that you live in, right? What is it that's happening around me? How can I change maybe the people around me or the company that I'm working for, or whatever? But honestly, you think beyond. Think beyond where you're sitting, what the company is doing, think beyond the project that you're working on, and think, how can I make an impact beyond that? How can I make something that's going to change how we make games for the next 3 to 5 years, right? Or even longer. How can I make an impact across the industry? Who can I share with? Who can I talk to? Whatever, across the industry. And it's events like this and things like the IGDA locally and all, or you make your own opportunity. You can join an alt dev volume, for example. But there, you find your own opportunities to do this, make a bigger difference. And I think the question that I find personally most frustrating when people don't have an answer to is, what do I have to say? Right? I think that every individual game developer, and certainly every studio, should have something to say. There is a reason why you're here, right? You are performers to a large degree. You're here because you are you are attracted to this entertainment industry, we make games, we are all effectively performers. We put ourselves out there to a degree. We put our part into this product, put it out there, whether or not it's online or on consoles or on retail, it doesn't matter. We're doing our part to perform in this game where we interact with the player in some way, right? But what do you have to say? Like, when you have this platform, say something. What's important to you? And you have to be able to answer this question, I think, in order to really take things to the next level. So let's talk a little bit about, as individuals, what can we do to aid harm? First, and I think the most important thing, in a very practical way, is you need to be the talent. As I said, the money, the recognition, the opportunities to do what it is that you want to do, those things all go where the talent is, period, globally. It doesn't matter where you are. If you are the talent, those things will come to you. So you need to be a talent. You need to make sure that you can do something that nobody else can do. You can do it better, you can do it faster, you can do it cheaper, whatever. You have ideas that nobody else has. You have something to offer, something unique. And I want to say specifically that brand is not a bad word here. That you need to recognize as individuals. That if I am a publisher, if I'm a developer, if I am the person that is looking to find somebody who fits this opportunity, or find somebody who can use this money to make something really good, if I'm looking for that, unless I've heard of you, you have no chance at all of getting that, right? And so you need to make sure that you get yourself out there as individuals, that we hear about you globally, that your voice is heard. And you sort of take some opportunities to build your individual brand. You are a game developer. That, as a thing, has value to you and to us as an industry. Value your own voice, right? Your voice has value. The things that you have to say has value, real value. Value that, take ownership of it. It's your voice. Don't let it be subsumed by the company that you're working for or whatever. Or the people around you. It's your voice. Own it. Get out there. Talk. Participate. Whether that's online, you could be on Twitter, you could be on Facebook, you could be on Alt Dev Blog Day, whatever. Get online. Participate with other game developers. Get known. Not only can you learn from them, but they can learn from you. And you can sort of develop your own brand, right? You can develop your voice. And other people can know why it is that they should be talking to you in the first place, when the opportunity comes. Collaborate. Find opportunities to get together for various reasons, whether it's just small things, right? We have game jams all the time. It's always a great opportunity to get together with other game developers just to do something, right? It doesn't even matter. If it's just an afternoon beer to just sketch out something really quick on a piece of paper. Get together, collaborate, learn how other people work. So, whether or not you're an individual or a studio, I think that you need to be able to answer the question, right? What is it that you're worth? Not just in terms of, your paycheck, right? But bigger picture. And more than just your sort of skills, whether those are artistic skills or technical skills, right? Because whatever those skills are going to be largely irrelevant in a few years, right? Whatever I learned 10 years ago, whatever I learned personally 20 years ago, I use very little of it today. Because I've had to learn new things along the line, right? And I suspect that in 10 years, a lot of what I'm doing today will be, again, largely irrelevant. And that's true for all of us, right? We need to accept that. So what is it that you bring to the table that's not just that, right? And I think that's part of what you need to be able to answer. What's your worth? What's your value? You need to answer this not just for other people, but for yourself. So you know you're worth something. You are bringing something to the table. So when you understand your worth, you're not going to take a lot of shit from people, when they try to devalue you. So of course, as I just mentioned, all of our skills are out of date immediately. As of today, all of our skills are out of date. And as of tomorrow, that will also be true, right? Continuously, we cannot learn fast enough, we cannot practice fast enough to know everything that is we need to know in order to do what we imagine is the best possible job, no matter what we're doing, right? That's totally fine. We are effectively perpetual amateurs. which I think is one of the attractions of game development, really. I certainly find it personally attractive that I am the sort of perpetual amateur, that no matter what I do, no matter how much I learn, there's always 100 times, 1,000 times more than that I couldn't possibly learn in the time that I have in order to accomplish the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. I know that, so Tina Fey, do you know who Tina Fey is? She has this new book, which I love, it's really fun. And one of the things she was talking about was Saturday Night Live. And I thought there was sort of one thing that she was talking about that I thought was sort of particularly relevant. She said, okay, when they're talking about Saturday Night Live, what they say is that the show doesn't go on because it's ready. It goes on because it's 11:30. And I think that's true of us in game development, right? The game doesn't ship because it's ready, and the game ships because it's time to ship the game, right? And that's true of us as individuals as well. You know, the thing that we're trying to put in the game isn't in the game because it's ready, it isn't in the game because it's done, or because it's the best possible thing. It's just because it needs to be in there in order to make the game, in order to ship. And then the next time, we learn more, we do better, we improve on that. And we just continuously do this. That's fine. That's the job. That's what we do. That's what I think all of us love to do. I think largely we should look at as a goal, as our individual goals, we should look at what our goal is to make what we do now, today, any given day, a commodity going forward. So that whatever I'm doing now as, let's say, an engine programmer or an artist or a designer, my goal is to make that irrelevant as quickly as possible. So that I can work on completely new things, bigger things, different problems. Because if I don't make that problem irrelevant, whether that's the engine development or this kind of game design I'm working on, then I won't have any room to work on something new. So what we need to concentrate on, sort of daily, sort of your daily mantra needs to be, how do I make whatever I'm doing right now totally irrelevant as quickly as possible? Our skill, globally, as game developers, our one skill is change. This is what we do. We adapt to change, we modify, we figure out how to do things. So when somebody says that the game industry is dead, or the public or publishers are dead, or publishers aren't doing this, or whatever, what we need to all remember is that we will adapt. That's what we do, right? We will continue to adapt. That's what the one skill we have as game developers. That's the thing that attracts us to this industry. And so that's great. That's all good. Then we need to ask ourselves the question of what we want to change. What's going on right now that we don't like? What is it that we have a passion about changing, and then do something about it. So for me, I'll try to share you some of the things that I want to change, and that I'm passionate about. I think the position of games, sort of globally, is something that I'm passionate about. How people perceive games, how they're used, where they're used, how those lessons that we have learned over the last few decades are applied. This is something that I'm passionate about. How we perceive ourselves in sort of this world hierarchy of things is something that I'm passionate about. How we develop games is something I'm passionate about. When I look sort of day to day and see how we are sort of stuck in this culture that we built for ourselves, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, based on a sort of retail model of making games. We can look at and say how studios are broken up into these different groups are working on different games, and then maybe some shared section is brought up, and this whole infrastructure, this whole design, down to how we name ourselves. As far as these are the programmers and they program, and these are the game designers and they design games, right? And how this whole division is designed around this sort of old retail model of putting out one game, putting out the next game, and these things, game A and game B have very little to do with each other except perhaps some shared code, right? That whole model is broken. And certainly as we look to other areas, we look to the web, we look to whatever, we see that model is broken, that we see that it just doesn't, it can't apply to a system where you need this sort of iterative development, online development, whatever, and you have a lot of shared content between multiple titles, most titles are live forever, whatever. There's way too many places where this model isn't working. So it's something that I'm really passionate about changing. How we divide up our studios, how we make games, what's important to us. And along with that, where we waste effort. There's so many cases where we simply just dump money down the drain simply because it's structured to do that. it's because this is the way we do it. So we destroy resources, we just leave things on the table, we leave talent on the table, whatever. This is something I'm passionate about changing. I'm also particularly passionate about pop culture. I love pop in general. I think that the goal of pop largely is to sort of reflect the world around us. It's to reflect the currents, what today, what are people thinking, what's the culture, whether or not it does that necessarily in a sort of functional way, sort of a constructive way, or if it does that or sort of organically, where it just happens to be the people that are in the middle of that are sort of speaking their mind. What it ultimately does is reflect the culture that we're in. And I think to a large degree, certainly the games that I like to make, and I think to a large degree a lot of the games that we make are part of this global pop culture. And so what we need to do is think about the culture that we're in, right? We need to take that seriously, understand what we're in, understand what it is that we want to say about the world that we're in, and reflect that in our work. So this is just something that I'm personally passionate about. I think as individuals, what we need to be is ambitious, right? It's not a bad word. We need to look and say, okay, how can, not just how can I get to the next level, how can I go from programmer to senior programmer or whatever, but how can I go from where I am today to making a huge difference in the industry around the world, right? That's the kind of ambition that we need as individuals. We need to, and the only thing I think that's holding us back is the belief that we can't do that. But the fact of the matter is that we can, right? We're in a position globally as individuals, as game developers, that no one else is. Everyone, as I said, every company everywhere in the world wants what we have, wants to know what we know, and to be able to apply it to what they do. We're in position to change the world. Have a strategy though. You can't just do it. It's not magic, so you need to think about it. Step back, have a strategy, what is it that you want to accomplish, what's important to you, and figure out what's the first step toward getting there. As studios, I think we also need to I think one of the things that we forget as studios is that it's not a zero-sum game, right? Especially when we're talking about entertainment. We make the market as we develop things. When you create a new game that attracts a larger audience, it's not at the cost of another audience, right? To a large degree, the audience grows. And so it's absolutely not a zero-sum game. There's absolutely no reason, as a rule, that we shouldn't be talking to each other, we shouldn't be collaborating more, we shouldn't be seeing how we can reduce waste across studios, for studios that are not at all connected to each other in any way other than, hey, can we both reduce costs by working together on something, right? I think there's a lot of missed opportunities. And especially if we look in a sort of a local environment like Australia, there may be, an opportunity, the same thing, for a lot of studios, especially small studios, right? There's like 5, 6, 10 people, whatever, getting together and saying, okay, look, we're all trying to do a lot of the same stuff. How can we reduce some of this waste, or how can maybe we share some of these things, or whatever. The opportunities to do that are up to you, right? Where that makes sense. But I think what we need to remember is that it's not a zero-sum game. That if we can both be successful, how do we reflect the world around us as a studio, along with as individuals? I think this is something that we need to answer. Because when you're a student, you're making multiple titles. Each one of those things, each one of those titles, your community out there, they all say something about the world that you're in. So what is it that you're trying to say? And remember that the culture sort of that we're in right now is this sort of connected and entitled culture, right? Largely we look at, I certainly, I say this having a 16-year-old daughter who is, an entitled American girl teenager, right? And it's just sort of, this is something that we need to recognize, right? When we go, it's not helpful to go online and say, well, all these people bitching that they didn't get this for free, right? Well, they just need to shut the fuck up. That's not in any way helpful, right? Because it's simply the culture that we're in now. It has in fact changed, and people do expect certain things to be free. They expect way more than makes sense, sort of economically. But we need to work with that. We need to understand how that can work for us. We need to position what we're trying to sell in whatever context in a way that makes sense for them. It's only going to work if you actually understand that culture and apply what you're doing to fit. We also need to think, as studios, sort of looking at our games, for value beyond features. Over the last, let's say, 20 years, it's been about hard features. It's been about those bullet points in the back of the box. The engine can do this and this and this, and that's what makes it sets it apart, right? That era, as of now, is effectively dead. It's not about the hard features anymore. It's not about sort of comparing, the lighting model except for a few guys on Neo Game. It's not about comparing the lighting model on this to the lighting model on that, right? It's about the softer features. It's about, what value am I bringing to the player beyond these sort of these engine features or art features or whatever, or these story features. What is it that I'm bringing to them? Why should they play? What's important to them? What is it that they want? And sort of to go back to, sort of the connected nature of culture today. How can they share? How can they bring other people into this? How can they provide value to their friends, right? Whatever it is. And even as a studio, have something to say. What is it that you want to say to the world? What is it that you want to say with your games, with your staff, with your sponsors, whatever? What is it that you want to say? Know that, or you're not going to be able to message correctly, first of all. But I think you also will have a confused audience. And to a degree, I think I can speak from experience from that, right? When you don't have something clear to say, you have multiple titles that may say completely different things. You fracture your audience, you fracture your fans. They don't know what to make of sort of the other group of fans, and it's very difficult to work with them as a group and say, this is where we want to go together, and get feedback or whatever. So have sort of this core, of what you want to say in the studio, and think about emotional impact beyond story. Right, we hear a lot of we want to create additional emotional impact, so it means we need to create a large amount of story in our game, right? One, that's ridiculously expensive, and two, that's ridiculous, just straight up. So the linear storytelling, right, is like using that as the only way to impart emotional impact of the game is like I liken it to if you're trying to explain pain to somebody and then you just kick them in the balls, like. There's a whole world of much more subtle ways of imparting emotional impact. And we have an interactive community, right? We have ways of doing that interactively. So think about emotional impact well beyond story. I'm certainly no fan of games that just want to be movies. And I think to a degree, as studios, we're measuring the wrong things, right? We look at, we measure how good we're doing today by Metacritic or unit sales. And these are the wrong things, right? What these measure, not because Metacritic is fundamentally flawed. It is, but so is the rest of the whole fucking world, right? So what? But it's because it's not measuring what it is that's actually important. Metacritic and unit sales are all based on this sort of old retail model. It's based on this whole history, the whole history we have. I put a game out, it goes on a disc, it goes out there. This is how we make games, one game at a time. And it's individual games that are important. And it's not sort of, as a studio, it's not this larger brand, the studio brand, which is way more important than individual titles, right? It's like, to sort of go back to another example, it's like Coca-Cola, right? Coke is about this sort of brand of Coke, right? It's about people knowing kind of what they're going to get. And it's about this sort of this feeling that people want to get impart by drinking this bottle of water with sugar in it, right? The value that bottle of water actually brings to people is very low, certainly much lower than the game. But it's a sort of brand across all their products. That's the thing that they measure, right? What's the impact on individual lives? What's the impact across? How many people do they impact? That's the thing that they measure. And I think that to a degree, we have way bigger opportunity than anybody like Coke, for example, to measure that. One, it's directly measurable, and two, we're way more impactful. We can be impactful in a lot of different areas, right? So I think what we want to measure is how, if it's about quantity, fine. How many people have you impacted? How have you impacted them, right? Measure the things that matter, and these other things will follow from that, right? These are secondary measurements, not primary measurements. The other thing that bothers me about these particular measurements is that they're game specific, right? They don't measure anything about their brand as a studio across those titles. And then what they continue to encourage is sort of the siloing of individual games, right? Where we put all the developers on this one game in this bucket, and all the developers in this other game in this other bucket, and then challenge each other to a brawl in the middle for Metacritic score, right? And in fact, that's it's wasteful to a large degree. But beyond that, again, it just continues to sort of encourage this process. So, like I said, for both individuals and for studios, it's about sort of this brand. It's about building your individual brand, your studio brand, knowing what you want to say, but it's not just IP, right? When we hear a lot of people talk about brands, what they're really talking about is IP. Build this one product, build another product, sort of collect up this IP portfolio, but that's not really what it's about. The IPs are important. The IPs are part of this. The individual games you make are certainly a part of this, right? But the brand is bigger than you, right? It's got to go across all of your products. It's got to go across as an individual all the things that you do. And it's like Coca-Cola. And I think Coca-Cola is a great example. If we look at somebody like Coca-Cola, or we look at somebody like Apple or whatever, there is absolutely no reason why an individual game studio cannot stand head-to-head, eye-to-eye with a product brand like that across the world. One thing that also kind of pisses me off, and this is going to be a hard fight, but there you go. I'm willing to fight it. Is that game dev brands are way more important than hardware brands, right? The PS3, the 360, those are not the important brands, right? It's the games that are the important brands, and yet we allow ourselves, as a group, to sort of be subsumed by these other brands. To say, it's about the PS3, it's about the 360, and to let sort of Sony and Microsoft as entities sort of continue to push this idea that it's about them, and it's about their hardware. Now, of course, they need to sell the hardware so we can put games on it if we're doing console games. But they want to do that anyway. So, we don't need to subsume ourselves to their ideal in order to do that. I think what we need to keep in mind as individuals, as studios, that it's the game dev brands that are the important thing. These are things that need to be way bigger than the hardware brands, way bigger than console, way bigger than platform. Certainly, this is even true outside of consoles, right? We're looking at the platform space. We have a lot of game developers who would imagine themselves as sort of below the platform that they're working on. Whether it's say Facebook, for that same example. There's no reason why a game developer. It just happens to be the platform you're on. The game is, or can be certainly more important than the platform that it's on. When people talk, a lot of people talk about publishers, and often in sort of this very deriding way, the publishers made me do this, the publishers made me do that, or whatever, as studios. I think that just often what you need to do is sort of step back and remember, and keep in mind, what does the publishers want, right? And ultimately, they want their brand to be better. They want to sell more units, right? They want to sell more games. And that's really it, right? They want to sell more games. And you guys, as individuals, you guys as studios, are the experts in doing that, right? Or you ought to be, right? You are the ones who should be able to say, this is what will make this game better. But you also need to recognize that the publishers have a lot of information that you don't have, right? Across all the games that they've ever worked on, a lot of data that they can share with you and talk it through. And then you can use that to help guide your decisions. But whenever there's a sort of conflict, whenever I hear a publisher made me do this, it tells me immediately that there's at least two people not talking in this relationship. Because you both want the same thing. So you need to sort of step back, imagine what it is they want. If the decision is coming because you don't have the data that you need to make the right decision, get that data, or ask for it. Another thing that's very frustrating to see, especially small developers do, is to sort of give up their player trust network to the publishers. As a studio, what you're doing is you're sort of building this player trust network, right? You're getting players to sort of trust the things that you make as a studio and as individuals. And when you sort of give that up to the publisher, sometimes in a very practical way, sometimes the publisher will handle all the forums and all that sort of stuff, right? And you're not interacting with your own community, with your own players, with people that trust you, then you're losing huge opportunities to sort of learn from them, discuss with them, figure out how your brand, your studio, you as an individual game developer should should react or whatever, don't give up your player trust network, right? Or certainly work with the publishers when it comes down to it, so that you can still sort of interact with them, work with them, whatever. Monetization is not a bad word, right? Certainly among the indie group, we'll often hear that, well, it's not about making money, it's about making games. And to a degree, that's true, right? I mean, we all love the art of making games. We all are game developers. But I think certainly if you look at it, from my perspective, which is sort of this pop entertainment spectrum, it's both. It is making money and it is making games. And both of these things are together. And we certainly can't make the games without making the money. So the reason why we're able to sit here, the reason why we're able to do it, what it is that we want to do, is because we ultimately we can make money to do that. And I think as players, right, we need to remember, as players, we're often happy to pay for the things that we love, right? We don't have a problem with that. So we can't, it's okay to ask for money for people to do, for things that people love, so that we can make more things that people will love. And that applies to sort of the monetization aspects inside of the game. Sort of whether or not that's sort of selling little things in the game, or free to play, or whatever the model is that you personally don't think is awesome. The idea is simply that we need to make money in order to make more things that people love, right? Or that we love to make. Also keep in mind, as sort of a general rule, you will be outsourced. There's certainly, I don't think there's anybody here, and certainly not me, that has to bring the kind of money that certain studios and certain places can bring to the table to make a game. You are not going to be spending $100 million on your game. Very likely. I mean, raise your hand if you are. Okay. Very likely you're not, right? I'm not. Most people aren't. There's somebody out there that will outspend you. Period. So do not compete in a race that can only be won by the person that spends the most. And I think that's a hard lesson that people have. So that they try to compete in things that can only be won by spending more. So if you find that if you find that thing that you need to do in order to make this game successful is to have an army of animators working on facial reconstruction or whatever for this large amount of cinematics that you need in your game, then there might be a problem, right? You need to step back and think, what is it that I can do differently? What is it that I can offer given what I have? And what is it that we have that's unique, that no matter how much they spend, they cannot do. I think that's the key. That there are things that you can do as an individual, as studios. There's always a cultural, there's always sort of a group cultural dynamic. There's always something you have that is unique, that only you can offer. That no matter how much they spend, they cannot offer that same thing. That's the thing you need to focus on. We need to be where the players are. This sort of speaks back to that sort of, where the console's going, where the platform is going. Wherever the players are, that's where we're being. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. So, to wrap all this up, the two things that I want you to think about when you go out and you're talking over coffee or tea, after today, when you're listening to other speakers, whatever, is one, how can you aim higher? Is there any sort of invisible class barriers that you have in your head? How can you get rid of those? And what can you do? Right? Change is your responsibility. Where is it that you're blaming other people for change? Put that aside. What can you do to make a difference? So, thank you.
So we have time for, let's say, 3 questions. By the way. By the way, before he actually answers this question, if any of you are looking for a job in 5 to 10 years, you need to give your CV to Josh now.
Thanks for the intro. Seeing as how you're saying society that games are seen as being looked at things to even a job, what do you think we can do, anyone else here can try and involve? What can we do to make us more apparent to society and actually everywhere? What can we do?
Well, I mean, I think as far as our appearance, right? I mean, I think we are everywhere. I think that's the point. We are already everywhere. There isn't a person, to a person, I think, that hasn't had some exposure to games, or isn't seeing them or playing them, or is now being inundated with various games in various forms, in their everyday life, right? So I don't think it's about us doing necessarily you can do more, right? But that's not the problem. I think the real problem is our own beliefs as individuals. That we don't believe that we are there. We don't believe that we are as big as film, right? We don't believe that we're making that kind of impact across the world to in fact, billions of people, right? And I think that's the thing that we need to change. How do we perceive ourselves? What do we believe? And I think we need to start with us, understand that we know that we can make a difference, that we know we are impacting this many people. That's where it really needs to start. Yes?
I was actually reading one of your articles about some of the exercises that you run with your engine program. And they often, a lot of the exercises talk about to shift your programs from that quite solid logical space into something else. How do you think that helps you actually achieve those goals of aiming high and actually creating that technology into something?
Okay, so to sort of step back, if you guys aren't familiar, I have a weekly meeting with the engine team, and largely the engine team is a very technical, programming-heavy team, right? And every week we have exercises as part of this meeting, and some of the exercises might vary from meeting to meeting, and they might be something like, all right, imagine that. Let's see, I'm gonna try to think. What was the last one we did? I don't remember what the last one I did, but it may be something like, imagine that you only have one room to make a game. You're making a game with only one room and 4 pieces, whatever those are. What could you do? And sort of get into a group scenario. Get the teams up into group and like 4 or 5 people, and then just work it out for like 5 to 15 minutes, and then just sort of dump ideas out. Or actually, I do remember the last one, which was. If no, now I don't remember anymore. I had it for like a second. But anyway, that's sort of the idea, is that we go through these exercises every week. And so the question is, how does it make a difference, right? As a group and as a studio, in sort of changing our thinking. I think it's huge, right? Honestly, just the week to week sort of the momentum that gets built, and to get people, I think gets our group thinking about things beyond the thing that we're working on, honestly, right? Even if they're not talking about our games, it gives them perspective. So when we talk more globally about what the studio is doing, what our games are doing, people will feel more comfortable having an opinion about those things. So sort of practiced in having an opinion about those kind of things. And practice at sort of playing with those kind of ideas. Some are game design, some are art, some are maybe more industry-wide, some are financial, right? The exercises vary. But the idea is to sort of get people thinking more, outside the box. And I think it also changes the way they work. And I think little by little, as you build momentum, even with just small exercises, it gets people, it changes the way they work. And then, maybe next time they're working on a small, what's mostly a technical problem, right? They'll think about, okay, how could this be applied in some creative way? And they may talk to artists or designers or whatever more than they might have otherwise. And so it's this sort of grassroots kind of effort. And I think it does make a difference. It would be hard for me to pin it down on what difference it's made, right? But I think it does, and I certainly will continue to do it. Yes?
What's your opinion on the idea or concept of, say, role models and the extension, the game developer celebrity that as seems more prevalent these days, for example, this presents the Doug Lombardi or John Carmack?
So I don't think that those are the same thing, right? I mean, I don't think sort of a game development celebrity is a logical extension of a role model. I think when I think role model, I think mentor, right? And I think somebody who's sort of working with other developers, working with individuals, whatever, to help make them better, right? And that person could be a game development celebrity or not, right? These are, I think, sort of separate issues. But as far as what do I think of the game development celebrity, yeah, I think that to a degree, it's kind of what I'm talking about. It's about saying, I have a voice, I have my own brand as an individual, and when you think of this, you're going to think of me, right? And I think that as a group, that's what we all need to do a little bit more of. So that whatever it is that you do, and honestly, I don't know what you do, which is actually a problem, right? I should be able to say, this is what you do, because I've heard of you, and I've seen your picture a million times online, and oh yeah, when I think of whatever it is that you do, I think of it, and there you are. But I think that we all need to do a little bit more of that. Or with the opportunities are going to pass us by just because no one will know to ask you. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Please thank Mike.